All right. So I think we can go ahead and begin. Good morning, everyone. We'll say a prayer this morning. This is prayer number 17. Prayer number 17. So that's all I have to say, right? Everybody's got it. So this is in the back section of the Book of Common Prayer. There's a bunch of prayers, and this is on page 819. If you have a Book of Common Prayer handy, let us pray. O God, whom saints and angels delight to worship in heaven, be ever present with your servants who seek through art and music to perfect the praises offered by your people on earth, and grant to them even now glimpses of your beauty, and make them worthy at length to behold it unveiled forevermore. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Stacy?
Thank you, Jeff. Happy Sunday, everyone. This morning, I'm excited to welcome Diana Chou back to the forum. Today's presentation is entitled Kings, Queen, and Parable: How Christian Art Has Changed in Time and Place. Diana is an art curator at the San Diego Chinese Historical Museum. Trained in art history, she specializes in East Asia. Diana has curated numerous exhibitions at the San Diego Museum of Art and the Dayton Art Institute. She has traveled across the United States and around the world to China, England, Germany, Korea, Scotland, and Italy to give lectures, gallery talks, and presentations. Diana is also the author of many publications, including in Oriental Art Magazine and Oxford University Press's Benedict Dictionary of Asian Art. Please join me in giving Diana a warm welcome. And may I ask everyone to please put yourself on mute so that Diana can speak freely.
Thank you, everyone. It's really an honor to see some of very happy to some of you. Now, before I start, let me share my screen first. Okay, let me slideshow.
Recording in progress.
Now, as you know, that I was hesitated to give this talk, but I'm grateful for this opportunity because I guess I realize I don't know everything. So the art history is as large as a big ocean. So I really, that humbled me actually. Now that because of this learning process, it also also provide me opportunity to learn. So that intellectual satisfaction is a wonderful experience. So again, thank you. Now this topic is sounds like King, Queens, and Parable, isn't because I don't want to make it a title very lengthy. So I actually shortened. Actually, there are also parable. Besides parable, there's also the prophets. We'll be talking about if time allowed. Oh, sorry. I couldn't. Sorry. Now, my first talk, if you are in my first talk, you realize that I actually grouped my topic in three themes. And first, the life story of individual and the specific events and a significant individual or saint particularly. And I don't think today we were able to cover the saint. The basic that is also follow this formula. However, the only change is that the chronological order. The last time I gave it the story of the Old Testament and then go to the New Testament. But this, because I group it by theme, so the order is not actually follow that procedure. And this is something I want to emphasize that. Now also the object here to talk about is actually only one is a sacred art. The rest was fall into the secular contents. But neither one is this. This is actually is where the story that allow artists to sort of kind of fully exercise their talent. So some will maybe struggle, but the outcome, since we no longer see their struggles in terms we see the outcome, the nicely outcome. So this is something that I would just want to make it clear. Now the next is the definition. Of course, we all know what king and queens mean, but I just want to make a clarification. This is where I was looking at it. So pretty much a very straightforward male ruler, a female ruler, or a chief authority over a nation of the people. But one thing I want to point out is also definition of the king and the kingship and the queenship. Sometimes it's also someone inherit the position by the right of a birth. Of course, you all know this definition. Now, the other thing I want to emphasize is attribution. Because we are talking about images. So the kingship or queenship sometimes is abstract in the sense, in textual sense. Now, if we have this attribution, pictorial images actually help us to identify when we're looking at objects. So here's a regalia that including many things, scepter, crowns, and other ornamentation. So this is something I would like to look at, especially when we come to the topic. Just hold on a second. I think my mouse doesn't move this way as I wish it. Okay. Now the first king we talk about is King David. But before we started that, Bible actually talk about a lot of rulers and kings in books of Judge and also 2 books of Kings, and some was repetitions in the book of Chronicles. Judge is more like a general ruler, it's more like a leader in general sense. But of course, I'm not going to talk all those kings. So they are quiet. Now, David, the reason I choose David is many reasons, of course. First, he actually occupied a huge space in the biblical accounts. So on the left side of you see that I give you the rundown sort of, that David actually appeared first at the first book of Samuel and beginning at chapter 16. Now, first book of Samuel has 31 chapters. So he became chapter 16, completely through the 31st to the 31 chapter, I'm sorry, and then continue go through entire second book of Samuel, which is consists of 24 chapters, and the end of the second chapter of the first book of Kings. So almost 41 chapters all about David. So this is also give you a sense of how important, at least if why biblical account has taken so much, author would spend so much time on talking about David. That's one. Now, because the story, because it's so lengthy, so a lot of story about him, including the women in his life, which is one of you probably very familiar with Bathsheba. So, that gives you an artist. A lot of artists can choose any part of the story of him to eliminate in their work. So, but I'm going to choose 2 artwork to illustrate it, to talk about David. One is his entrance, how he look. So their description of how he looked like. This is one. And the second image is more about their special bravery, that victory that he took at the first in the Bible. So this is the 2 things that I'm focused on. For those, if you are interested in other part of the story, I'm sorry that I will probably didn't provide you the story about he and Bathsheba, the mother of King Solomon. Now, so first entries is that this giving you roughly that he probably was recognized at the age of 16. We don't know exactly age, but probably roughly that age or maybe even younger, because in the text on the right give you a sense that he's the youngest of Jess, the father. Some of you all remember that David also great-grandson of the Ruth. So Jess, that lineage was come down from Ruth and the most. And then so Jess, the youngest son, and then he did not become the king until the age of 40. When I say king, we talk about as a ruler. And then he ruled two places. One is Hebron for 7 years, and later Jerusalem for 30 years until end of his life. Now, archaeology also discovered that they actually find David's palace, the ruin of a palace. So David indeed is a historical figure that actually is a real person. The only things that I'm not sure that how big his kingdom. He probably ruling a pretty small territory. Because during this time, Israel actually divided by several kingdoms, and he rules Jerusalem. So this is just a very small kingdom, but we still consider he's king. It's not as a great king as we like to imagine. So basically, that's the basic line of story. So then on the right hand, you see that describing him is rowdy. Rowdy pretty much is mean kind of reddish, very healthy looking complexion. So this is where in a description of that. And young and beautiful and good looking. And next is to talk about where is his lineage. He's the son of the jazz. And he's a harpist, so he's a musician. But not just that, he's a brave warrior, he's a great speaker, and as a handsome young man. And the last thing is about 16, the verse 23 overall was described, but that he actually still things Saul. Now, this is a little bit background. Samuel is a prophet, as you all know. He appointed kings in God's will. And Saul was the predecessor of David. But God decided to abandon Saul. So when the time when God abandoned Saul and has Samuel to finding a young man to replace, which is David, that Saul was very tormented. After that, I guess the Holy Spirit removed out of his body, so he will be always tormented. So actually, David would play harps that was soothing, able to soothing his soul. So pretty much at this paragraph, at this description, that David already have the characters of being a leadership, because he's good looking. Well, good looking never hurt, right? But he definitely is. He has bravery. He has courage, so he can leave the military or facing the battle without fear. And at the same time, he is also eloquent. Eloquent pretty much is mean that able to make a friend, make an ally, or turn enemies to friends. That kind of ability. And the most intriguing part for me is he's also a musician. So he has a talent, right? Besides, he also has cultivated. He also has, he's also cultivated in a way that I have appreciation of the fine arts. And the other part is that he actually has a healing power. So maybe he actually set a very interesting of a notion of how ruler or kingship should be on one human being. So this is the part that intriguing me. And then, of course, the second reason I choose David, because there are a lot of story, a lot of images left. So you might as able to find a lot of information or try to looking at the artwork, and that actually associate with David, because it has quite importance of a space in Bible. Now, the first object we are looking at actually is a very, actually quite interesting for that manuscript. This is called a Paris Sumpter. This is actually first page, or we call the first leaf. Now, the reason that first leaf, now, first of all, Sumpter, you know, that's in content the book of Psalm, and including church calendars and maybe clergy rituals, etc. The reason this was first page is that traditionally, we believe that traditionally was attributed to David is the author of the book of Psalm. Of course, he is not complete, has a credit for that, but this is traditional belief. So this a whole manuscript, this first page was portray David. It's easily, you notice that the center is the David. And how do we know that? Because there's a harp. This is kind of arguable. He probably looked like more like a deer, but I don't want to get into that detail. But anyway, he was a musician. He was playing the music. So that's a very prominent image of described David here. Now, the other thing I want to point out before we go to the detail is that the paint is very early, usually paint on the vellum. Vellum actually is a baby lamb skin, yeah. And technically, you need a process, you need a coat of burnish to make the surface very smooth and then paint over. And this is a very common practice in medieval time. And that's where they document and preserve the information. So that's why, because the skin itself has certain nature, the resistance of this of the paint. So you actually, there's a two lines. It's not a breaks. Breaking is actually partly from the smooth surface of the skin. Now, this manuscript also very interesting, the time. When I say the timing, 10th century AD, if someone very as familiar with what I said last time, this is roughly early Byzantine time period, Christian time. So, and it's medieval time, of course. But the reason I'm saying it's unusual is in the early Christians, the Byzantine time, there's a very dominant of in terms of artistic representation is tend to be restrict expression of a human emotion. So this is definitely not follow that particularly style, definitely not. Instead, this actually follow, you can see a lot of inspiration sources came from Greek and Roman influence. First of all, there's a whole setting of the landscape, nature, outdoor with the, if you can see the rain, actually, sorry about my mouse. You can see the tiny streams in your foreground and the space, the foliage on the back. And forgive me. It's really annoying. And then you see the background of the foliages, and then you also see the detail in the corner. You can see architectural view. This is very, very, very exact. The description often you see in the Roman wall paintings. Some of the wall painting actually discovered, you can find it in a museum, you can find it in the villas. Getty Villa has some of that. And those Roman wall painting usually date the 1st century AD. And also the distance, sometimes they also emphasize the three dimensions, three dimensionalities. All those are actually was inspired by Greek and Roman, besides all the description of garden and nature. And if the background composition that do not convince you there's a Greek and Roman influence, then let's look at the figures and also implication of the figures. Now, the part of that talk about Greek and Roman influence is obvious on the figures. First of all, those figure meaning they show volumes, three-dimensional, sort of kind of three-dimensionality as well, and also heavy structure under the garment. And those kind of figure in the way of the pose that definitely remind you a lot of it from look like the high relief sculpture at the Parthenon figure. And that's very obvious of that. Now, second is the names I list on the bottom. First of all, one of those figures. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention something else. And the pillars, those pillars with ribbon and the decoration, and they also from Greek and Roman influence. Now, figure this Melody. Melody is one of the 9 muses. Is a goddess of music, dance, yes, and something like that. Yeah, something like that. So this is referring to David was playing music and maybe also playing, sort of kind of referring to the nature of Book of the Psalm. Can be seen, it's very poetic, it's the lyrics. Now this is the echo. Of course, the echo is follow the music, follow the sounds. So this is two figure, definitely emphasize the music part of that, which is not so much of a medieval time, that kind of a constraint of the feeling or constraint of certain elements in fine arts. Now, who is this corner, the guy that's sitting at the corner? this is a personification of the Mount Bethlehem, because that's where origin, the ancestor of David came from. Remember we talked about Jess. And how do we know it is a personification? Because there is an inscription in the corner, and I helped us to understand and identify that. Now, all those figure personification of the figure is very clear of Greco-Roman mythology, came from Greek mythology. That's part of it. It's not so much a part of a Christian tradition. So this has really heavily inspired by the Greco-Roman. Now, the other thing is also this David. Here, he also identified as Orpheus. Orpheus actually is a poet and musician, and also believe is a tamer of wild animals. So this is actually tied with David as a shepherd, because a shepherd sort of is not, you just not, so he is portrayed not just the leader of a people, but he is also leader of an animal. So here you see that sheep and goats, and of course the shepherd dogs oftentimes was associated. So was it portrayed in this particular image. So this is pretty much just to tell you what David looked like. So from now on, you might see a lot of images that actually portray David associated with harp. I didn't have an image here, but if you look at the St. Paul's Cathedral stained glasses, I believe there's one panel actually is David, because he wears the crown, he has a robe, but then he has a harp. So if I'm wrong, please correct me at that image, but I strongly believe that image. So next time you go to church, you look at, I think it's on the south side, on the top of tiers. Now the next image about David is talk about bravery of David. Actually, I sometimes feel sorry for David. His whole life is really facing a lot of challenge. He's not a small, remember I say he began at the age of maybe 16 or even younger as a shepherd boy, and then coming to a very important historical moment. But he never become a king until the age of 40, which is all those 25 years or even that he actually has facing several things, including a terrible hatred from Saul. Now, but just right at the introduction of his coming to this historical moment, the first challenging he has to face, this giant in history, which is a Goliath. That's very hard to pronounce, Goliath. So this is according to the Bible, Samuel 17. So he appears Samuel 16. And then 17, he had to face this serious issue here. Now this giant is 9 feet and 9 inches tall. This is just the equivalent I gave you, because the Bible account actually using cubits, so it's very complicated. Now this giant also wear bronze helmet and armors weighed roughly 5,000 shekels, pretty much 15 pounds. So it's pretty large, and you can see that he was able to take it down. I will have to give a detail before he go to, this is like a post-victory. This is really post-victory because he already finished battle. But there's a lot of things before the battle taking place. So he take it, of course, I guess the victory oftentimes this time, probably when someone's win the battle, you will cut the head off the other opponents, and then and take away the sword of the weapons of your enemy. I'm sorry. But before he go to the battle, there's some description. Now this description probably show the bravery of the part of it. He actually Saul want to give him armor to go to the battlefield. So I try to imagine that, I think there's a little bit comic here, a comic feeling of this description is that Saul is already 30 or 40 years of a middle-aged man that has this armor, which is he's also a great warrior, but he's going to give his armor to give this 15 or 16 years boy to wear. It's really out of place, and that's actually handicap David's emotion. So that's why he decided to say, I can bear hands, kill lion and bear. So I don't need this. I don't need this armors or weapons. So that's another way is how eloquent he actually convinced this king that Saul to let him really walk away without have the whole package that he want to give to him. But what did he did? David actually selected 5 smooth stones and put them in the pocket of his shepherd's bag. And with his sling in hand, he approached Philistine. So this image, do you have what is the next one? Yeah. So this image pretty much is present that. So now back to the Donatello's sculpture. So this is really a very kind of vivid, also accurate, because if you're age of 15, that your body pretty much is sort of kind of semi-developed, but not quite developed. So this is a statue definitely give a sort of kind of very youthful looking of a boy, but not just simply reflected the Bible. There are also other elements, the philosophy behind the making of this. This is the first part. This is the first life size of David, King David. This is 5 feet 3 inches my height. So it's the first life size, but not the first nude figures, not the first male nude figure in history. But definitely it's first life size and nude David figures in our history. Now, nude figures is not something. There are 2 things I want to talk about the objects, because the story is pretty much here because he win a battle. He win a battle is no doubt. That's very clear. And he stand on the head of the giant. That's it. And then not much about the detail to go along. So statue itself, this statue itself has several meanings here. Reflect that some of you might be aware of that. Now, the interesting, to reflect the Italian Renaissance artists has huge interest on human body. But this is not something new in art history. The male nude figure was way back, it's already, we find in the 6th century BC in the Greek sculpture. Yeah, in the Greek sculpture. The reason that Greek are very into, so this is the Italian Renaissance was looking at the Greek. That's why Italian Renaissance, the definition, I know is a lot of definition to define the words. Renaissance literally means revival. But this, what kind of revival the Italian Renaissance was dealing with is a revival of the classicalism, which is looking at Greek Romans in terms of everything, not just art, is in terms of literature and also philosophy. So Greek Roman has a huge impact on, even they don't practice Christians. And Italian Renaissance, pretty much dominant Catholicism, there's no doubt. But that kind of Greek-Roman art actually has a huge influence on the Italian Renaissance art. Now, first of all, the nudity, the figure of a nude, that was nothing new in Greek. There are 2 reasons. One is also commemorating immortality. That's the way of looking at the object. Why they created figures, because they want to preserve and sort of kind of commemorate the life of the mortals. So they tend to portray the figure very youthful, young looking, because you look in the body, you look in the face, almost flawless. So that's part of the Greek tradition, passing to the Italian Renaissance. Now, second important thing was passing to the Italian Renaissance from Greek Romans is that very famous of a standing posture you are looking at. And I will bring another example. I'm not going to talk about the other example because you know all about very well, but I'm using that example to give you illustration here is this example, David, right? This is the Michelangelo's David. This standing posture called a contrapposto. Contrapposto actually Italian words. And then you might be asking me, say, well, you just say that is started in Greek time. It is start actually Greek time, because they find the standing posture, contrapposto, was exactly in the Greek sculpture, but the word actually was only used, created in the later, which is Italian Renaissance period. So they use the Italian, so the contrapposto. What contrapposto means? Contrapposto literally means as a counterpositioning. Counterpositioning, meaning not just right side versus left side, I'm talking about the figure. So that's why I bring Michael's work in. The left side versus of the right side, the top torso versus of the lower torso. This is the most natural standing posture when human was standing. Some people maybe call it a free standing, but I think that's not free standing. It'll be loose term, and I wouldn't use that. It's actually contrapposto. Now, how do I define contrapposto? Which means let's start with the lowest torso, which means that your right foot was actually stand straight as the center of your whole body. So all the weight will be pressed on the right leg. And while your right leg become an axis, your left leg will naturally bend your feet. So that's where David's come much more better looking from frontal view. So you see the left leg would naturally stand. Now there is also one very important, because while your weight was in the center, that give you a lot of mobility on your left one. So you can move a circle, turn almost 360 degree, and you also stand in the center. So this is also not just the most natural way of standing, but it's also most stable way of standing, also visually, in terms of also in visually looking at it. Now, while you will stand, you will focus on your right, and then your left actually will be, so this axle, this is where the back view of a Donatello figure give you a much more strong, clear interpretation that I was giving, is that your right butt will be very tight. That's where the weight was supporting, and the left will be more relaxed. And sorry. Then at the same time, the top of torso is not straight in frontal uneven. No, and maybe this on the Donatello give you a little bit, you slightly tilt the direction. When you slightly tilt, hold on. When you slightly tilt the body in terms of the balance to the lower section, and then the head also have the balance by tilt. In the same way, actually there's contrast. Your right arm actually relax, drop to contrast your very tense of the right leg. I hope I did not explain too much complicated, but I just want to give you a sense of that kind of contrapposto from this moment onward. Almost you see in both sculpture and in painting that they actually portray that contrapposto throughout almost the work, and even probably today. And so this is the two very important of the came from the sculpture on the right. But of course, we think that this is a little bit exaggerating. But anyway, that's another story. Now, the second king is a little challenging. By showing this image, you probably know what I was trying to portray here. But this is very important, one of the most ambitious work, and considered by a lot of scholars is one of the probably the great masterpiece from the Flemish art of the 15th and 16th century. This, before I start talking about specific images, because this is really open discussion in a way that the interpretation is not written in stone. You can interpret it your way. Even I have my way of interpretation, but you can choose the way you want to interpret it. But before I start, I really want to talk about this artist. This is what one of the great artists. If our historian thinks it's a great masterpiece of the Flemish art, for me, I think this is one of the great masterpiece for the Western art civilization. This one also very clearly, this is a sacred object. It's a holy object. Before start, this several important, like a 3-in-1. The most significant historical, religious, artistic significance all in one. Now, who is this genius? Oh, yeah, I call it sort of kind of. I like to see that he's a genius. This work actually was started with Hubert. This is a brother, Hubert and Jan van Eyck. But Hubert actually died in 1426. So you see the piece was ended in 1432. So pretty much Jan van Eyck finished finish of this. We believe that maybe Hubel was provider of the composition, at least in some degree. But the point is that Jan van Eyck's the talent, the skill, or the genius, or way of painting skill is really surpass his generation, and probably also set a very high bar that later artists very hard to surpass him. So this is something quite important. But it's not just this reason I want to share with you this object, but there are other reasons. This is a current form. When I say current forms, there are some sort of arguments that this is not where original was produced. This current form is not original how to produce. Now, why is that? That had to do with this painting goes through a lot of trouble, a lot of suffering. Yes, if this work can speak, he will probably shout or scream. If this piece have emotion, I think he will cry or she will cry. So there's reason of that. Now let's begin. What's the history of that? I'm going to give you a list of the history. This is considered the most stolen artwork in history. Most stolen. First started in 1566 when Protestant militants broken down this cathedral. Remember, I said this is very holy. This is a sacred object. Okay, they plan to burn this piece. Why? Because they consider this is a Catholic idolatry. But luckily, that the church was aware of it, so they packed safely, so was escaped this tragedy. If it was burned down today, we will never have a story to talk about the burnout. Now, but then what's the second happening? Napoleon took it. Okay, when Napoleon came to Belgium, conquered Belgium, or depending on how you portray that. So he took it, brought back to France. And actually, this showed once at the Louvre. Okay. Then after defeating Waterloo, after the defeat of Waterloo, some panels, this is 12 panels total. When I say panel, actually we are talking about each this inch, so 12 panels, very large, and you can look at the size that. Some of it were returned. And some was sold to the German, which actually is called Kingdom of Prussia, which that's where the battle, but it's part of Germany, some royal family. In 1870, this has happened in 1870. Then again, some panel was stolen by the vicar at the church and ended up in Berlin. And World War I, German came in, took some rest of it. Until 1919, that the Treaty of Versailles agreed everything returned to the Zimbabwe Cathedral. So this piece was returning. This is really my bucket list. Someday I'm going to make my pilgrimage to Belgium to see this painting. I definitely will. So the treaty. But is that end? No. The story doesn't end in World War I. Story continue. In 1930, this panel, St. John the Baptist, and also the left corner, called Just the Judge. Those two were stolen. Then this panel was rediscovered. Fortunately, sorry, too fast. Sorry. And this never appeared, even until today. So what you're looking at is 1934 reproduction by John de Venken. I actually write on the bottom over here, giving you who's the artist. Art historians and scholars strongly believe that this panel at some day will serve. So if not our lifetime, maybe will serve. Now, because of this, and then what is it? And then this World War II, Nazi came in, took it. So because of this tragedy, all those a series of tragedy, people started taking this very seriously. It's probably not just only his religion's content, because of course this is definitely one of the great sacred arts, but also the history that I will just share with you. So beginning at the 2012, they go through a very large restoration. They haven't finished yet. There's a site I will share with you. They haven't finished. They started 2020 up to today. They haven't finished. It's already cost $2.2 million of euro dollars for restoration. Now the most striking is most recent. This is current form that was put in a very secure. What is it? It's bulletproof fiberglass case. It costs cost $30 million euro dollars. Keep it. This is where when panel in a traditional way, the panel would be closed. Usually closed. And I believe in traditionally, they will open up during a special calendar. I'm guessing Ascension will be, or the Pentecost, or this is my guessing. But today, no, they will be open daily. But they will be, because it's secured by this fiberglass. So there are mechanisms on the side will be gently open. And when they open, and daily, and then at the end of the day, you can close. During the COVID-19, you can schedule appointment coming to see these panels. Now it's pretty safe. I want to share a very clip because it gives you a sense of how interesting this piece is. And I think that you probably see the movie. Oh, if you don't, this is just one clip. And I think this will give you a sense of how the scale, how that was portrayed, and also the setting. The traditional setting. Okay, now what I show you is no longer traditional setting. Oops, I hope the internet was doing well. Can you hear the sound? Yes? Can I skip it? Can you hear the sound? No?
No.
But that's all right if you don't.
Yeah, I think to share a video, you have to change some settings when you do the.
Because you don't need a voice. You just need to see the image. Is that okay?
Oh yeah, but you have to turn the sound on for sharing to make that work.
Okay, sound to sharing.
So you'll have to stop sharing and then go to advanced. There's a couple of things that you have to do. I don't know if you want to stop and we can walk you through it, or what would be
No,
helpful.
that's fine. That's just,
Okay.
and you can always find on YouTube. But I want you to see the sense of the size of the images. That's my purpose. But of course, the sound make it more exciting because. But I'm gonna just share. Thank you, Jeff.
Nothing's
Not showing
happening,
anything.
Diana. It's just a still picture, that's all.
Oh. So you didn't see the video at all?
No, we did not.
Oh, I'm so sorry. No, maybe I should stop sharing. That's fine. Sorry about that. Thank you for pointing out that. Now I have to, but where is my screen then?
So if you'd like, I can walk you through how to
No.
share a video, or you want to move on, or what would be helpful?
Can you see the image now?
Yeah.
Okay, I will move on. Thank you.
Okay.
Because I want to save time. If you have time, we can come back to share that. Yeah. So the reason I want to show you the image is that actually the priest in the Zimbabwe was trying to take in piece one at a time to remove and put in the case. And that was the opening that actually reflected the World War II, which Nazi, they are aware Nazi is going to come into took it. So of course, Monumental Man is based on a lot of, the figure was, a lot of was fictionary figure, but actually was inspired by every person who actually participated of the rescue. Majority is Americans, of course, during World War II, that American actually was scholars, a historian, actually went out to search for the list of the thing will be taken by the Nazi. Now, some of you probably know that Hitler is not just persecute a human being, but he has this idea that he's going to build one of the largest museum in the whole world in his time, in his homeland, that will be housing all the best Western art that he will confiscate from the world. So that's where this piece was the target at the same time. So now with this bulletproof glasses and also restoration, I think he's in a very safe place. Unfortunately, it's not a traditional setting that I would like to see, but this is where interesting issue, if we are interested in the future, try to understand when sacred objects, religious objects was taken out of the original content or context and placed in a museum setting. In this case, it's already transforming as a museum setting in a way. And you have to think about the completely lost a lot of whole picture and the meaning sometimes. Okay, now back to the image. If you remember that images, which is I gave it right in the center, in the top. Now a little bit back a little bit is that why I say this is most people was believe it, because all those time was stolen and it come back. They really doesn't have really a photograph to prove what the original composition is. Of course, there are a lot of argument that they will fail to. I don't want to get into that because they feel this topic seems very heavy of image. It was very large, the balancing, and also is how the way it is. So this is a current form of a reconstruction. Most scholars and art historians agree this probably will be at least acceptable of composition. Is that original? We don't know. Okay. There's nothing we can talk on this. Now back to this. This is quite challenging in many ways because a king is a very abstract form in of concepts in the Bible. So this is not a comprehensive list, but that's the list that I was able to find how to describe it. And when I say this interpretation open, meaning that 3 interpretation, it's very easy. 1 is this God. 2, this is Jesus. 3, very small number, but 3, they think it's a Trinity. I will not consider this a Trinity. And of course, I have my own interpretation and I will try to convince you. I shouldn't say I try to convince you. I will try to share with you what I think, but you have your own judgment. And this is the part, I think the fun part with images, you can have your own interpretation, and I require you a little bit imagination to work, effort to working on that. Now the sum, all those, again, this is not comprehensive list. Mention some of this on the top. The Lord is king, God is king, God sits upon his holy throne, and law is glory. Now, Lord is glory is more abstract, actually give you the sense of the splendidness of that. And that's why I think this is very important. This is, if Bible did not provide a lot of, if Bible is not very descriptive, then there's a part that we need to try to associate or understand, and we need other elements to help. Now the other part is that the second section on the bottom is sort of kind of define this is Jesus. The first part sort of kind of on that is the Lord. So this some of you already know because he Jesus, according to Matthew and Luke, he is a descendant of David and King David. Now that gave it his kingship in a way on the earth. Now the psalm also mentioned that, someone mentioned that I will establish the line forever. I think that's alluding to the David. And then his throne was the day of the heaven. And the bottom that I found John's, that Jesus was referred as the King of Israel and King of the Jews. And on the Revelation, he's sat on a throne. Now, Revelation gives it a little bit detail that our throne was there in heaven, and on the throne there sat one whose appearance sparkled like jasper and carnelian, and around the throne it was a halo and a brilliant as emerald. The jewelry, jasper and carnelian, are all kind of brownish red. But the difference is jasper is opaque and the carnelian is semi-translucent. Now, emerald, you all know, is a very bright green, stunning bright green crystal. So that gives you a sense of the color, but also a sense of the splendidness of this image will be portrayed. The bottom is just a reminder of what we associate attribute with the kingship to sort of kind of argue this images. Now back, give you a sense of the image. Now going to the detail. First, remember we talked about a halo. So there's a halo, so of course, and sitting on the throne, he has scepter. Now, I have to give a credit to my dear friends, Dr. Guess, who is a medievalist and European artist, art historian. So he actually read those inscriptions for me. I don't read Latin or Hebrews. Now on the halo, this is the word. He is the God the most powerful because of his divine majesty. And this label, this ribbon on over his chest is the second one. Probably pronounced Sabbath. I could be pronounced wrong, sorry. But it's mean God. On the hem, the border, the hems of the drapery was really kings of kings. So this is the reading now. But the other thing that we need to look at, if we really want to get into identification of the figure, is that's quite important of the hand gesture. This is halo, sort of a different way of describing the halo. This is the earliest surviving example. On your right is the earliest surviving example of an icon of Christ. Dated 6th century AD, is in Egypt. And this is Christ, Jesus, okay? So we have to sort of I don't want to get into a detail a little bit, but one thing I want to point out is the hand gesture. Hand gesture. The hand gesture, in Bible, they mention that Jesus gave a blessing to the disciples, but we never know how he blessed. We never know exactly. So this is the part of the Bible was not very descriptive. Now the hand gesture definitely transformed. It's unlike other religions. I think hand gesture is not something very strong in Christianity in terms of Christian images, or because in other religions, for example, Buddhism and Hinduism, they developed a whole system of a hand gesture of their deities. They call it mudra. That's the Sanskrit. But in Christian, we has very limited. Christian art, we have very limited hand gesture, and the only one we got is Jesus' point has raised up open up sort of kind of fingers, and on the right, this is where it started developing that. So you see this kind of soft finger, very relaxed fingers, hand gesture, and gradually transform into much more permanent, much more direct of the hand gesture, come to the Jan van Eyck's work. Now, the other thing I want to point out, this is a scepter, and of course, but it's some sort of kind of variation of a cross because the form, the shape. The other thing I want to point out is the genius of Jan van Eyck, of course. that a fine detail of the hair. If you get to see the detail, even the wrinkle on the forehead, how detailed the textile on the back of the C, how softness of the tassels, and almost translucent, how sparkly of the jewels based on simply of his craftsmanship he can portray, and even the transparency of the crystal bar on your right hand. And that's why he gave a lot of credit, although he's not, he was credited the first person invent the oil painting, but no, it's just a method because oil painting is developing through the times. He's not the first one use it, but he definitely mastered quite well. That's where he get a lot of credit out of that. Now, if it does not convince you, let's look at the detail. Now, you might be asking me that why does another crown sitting on the floor? There's no answer, but my interpretation is the crown on the floor is crown of the earth. Who wear the crown of the earth? When he was called to sitting on the heavenly throne, he changed into another crown. So he has two crowns. And this part pretty much tell you that what I think this should be. So that again, the other detail. Our historians suggest, and I don't have an answer for you because I couldn't locate it. I'm just going to share with you. Our historian also suggests that sail portrait of Jan van Eyck actually was reflected in one of the pearl of the crown. Unfortunately, I couldn't locate it, but I'm going to share with you this. So this is back to how the composition it is. So you see where this piece was located. And not just this centerpiece, why Jan van Eyck was credited so important is also had to do with all other element detail he painted in this whole panel. And that actually, this is probably the only largest work that he actually produced. Jan van Eyck actually was well respected during his lifetime. And this is two of his artwork. On the right, called a Man in a Red Turban. Actually, we believe it is his sail portrait. On the left, actually, is also Christian art. This is the sacred art. But this is really fine painting. Yeah, and full with a lot of Christian symbolism in this whole painting. And it's a National Gallery in London. So if you have ever been there again, please really look at those fantastic paintings. That's the last view for that. Now, because I talk about king, and then next is about queen. This is where I'm going to go to. So it's very obvious because we things to talk about. Now, queen is unlike kings. There are some mentions of queens in the Bible, of course. Esther is a queen, was a queen, and also in Chronicle, sometimes when they mention the kings, they will mention the mother, and sometimes they are queens, and sometimes they are not queens. But queen in this category is not so much of rulership. A lot of time, queens do not have a rulership, and more about a royal status. So this is where Virgin Mary come to play. Now, this is the translation here. Actually, was the background of the inscription. But the other biblical account actually establish you, or at least allude to Virgin Mary was the queen. And I want to begin at the second part that she gave is a revelation. They never mention her name. The revelation never really point out the name, but it really alludes to her. Second part, that she gave a birth to a son, male child, destined to rule all nations. A child was caught up to the God and his throne. Now, it's the first one that I particularly stands out. And her head of a crown of 12 stars. She's with a child. Now, I was originally want to click the link but I'm afraid I was not able to share. So I'm going to just focus on here. This is the website. Actually, if you're very interested in all the procedure, they document every single thing about the restoration, the step, and also how far is how much is accomplished. Now the 12 star, if you look at the crown, can you see the crown here clear? I'm going to count with it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. You will ask me where is the 12. I assume one of the 12 actually behind. You had to understand that this is a 3-dimensional. So one of the star actually behind. So there are 12 stars. So this really reflect safe. It's definitely faithful for description. Now several symbolisms also appear. You see this lily. Lily, remember that is the purity of Virgin Mary. The rose is suffering, compassion, and love. Yeah, here. And if you look close between the flowers, there's actually a columbine. Columbine symbolize the humility. And if you look at the top of this rose, or in some over here, that's the lily of valley. Lily Valley actually is linking from the Song of Songs, chapter 2, actually to Virgin Mary. And I don't have more information about the song. So some of you probably, if you know, I'm happy to hear more. So this pretty much the description was really indicate that the Virgin Mary become the queen. So it established her queenship in this painting. And how the interpretation in Japanese are. Now, first of all, you probably would not convincing that why this has to do with Virgin Mary, except that there's a baby Jesus and a halos, and how this painting actually demonstrate the queenship. How can you compare with the Jan van Eyck that I was? Am I time up?
Yeah, well, just a time check because we're at 10 o'clock and I know there's some questions in the chat that people would like you to address.
Yes, I can stop here. I'm happy to stop here. And I'm so sorry there's so much information that I didn't prepare as well.
No, well, it's just a great indication that there is so much more of you we would like to hear from. And I don't want to cut you off, but I do know that there are questions in the chat that if you have a chance to glance through, people would love to hear some of your responses. If you'd like to hear, if you'd like to take a moment and glance through some of those questions and invite any other questions if you are willing to take some questions at this time. And we'll take maybe another 3 to 5 minutes on that. And I know people may want to head down to the cathedral or take a little break before we start our 10:30 worship. So we'll take about five or so more minutes and then we'll start to wrap up. Thank you so much for being here, Diana. And questions
thank you.
and responses to the chat.
Yes, I looked at it quickly. I think some I already answered. I believe, yes, Nazi Hitler definitely has fully aware of the significance of the importance of Jan van Eyck, particularly historian. By the way, Hitler was the artist, art student. He was trying to apply Vienna Fine Art School, but didn't get into. Okay, so he's a very mediocre average art student, was failed in the entrance to accept, recognize his artwork. So he has to do revenge in some degree. I'm not getting to that. So he aware of Jan van Eyck's works, definitely from his study. And the 12 star, I already mentioned that. So I already just explained that, the 12 star of that. Yeah, I know that actually I was hesitant to talk about Jan van Eyck, the piece, because I know his piece, if you really need to talk about that piece, will take at least 30 minutes out of the entire content. But it's such an important piece, not just historically, but everything. I think I mentioned, I don't think most of the comments. And thank you for all your appreciation. And I'm sorry the video didn't show us the way I wanted, but you can definitely go on YouTube and just look at the opening, check opening, Monumental Man opening. And if you are very interested in that part of the movie actually based on was based on another very important writing, and then also a documentary film called The Rape of Europa. that's actually talk about World War II, how Nazis systematically planned to lure the work from Louvre, other places of the world.
Could I ask, do you think the Ghent panels, were they Herrerados initially?
What do you mean by rare dose?
They stood behind the altar?
Oh,
Where
okay.
were
Where is
they?
it? Originally, actually behind the altar, yes, on the wall. Some was on the back, and later, actually, some of the panel was using cover for the organ. You know, they have organs. Yeah. Unfortunately, I would love to know more about that. That's actually a great question. But technically, because after they put it as reconstruction, whatever it is, like I said, it's definitely behind. That's where the film might give you a sense. They were actually right very behind the altar, where there's the circle of the light on the top. And so that's why when they can close during a regular day, and then they will open up during a special occasion. But today, 24, well, not a 24, like maybe whenever the church is open and whenever they close. Yeah. Mostly it's really a comments and appreciation. Thank you again. Thank you for so much. It's so interesting, this topic.
Thank you so much, Diana. We're so glad that we have your knowledge and wisdom and experience here to share with us. And it sounds like there's even more for us to delve into if you're willing to share it with us, and maybe even in forums to come. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
See you soon. Bye.
And next week we will have, there's been a little bit of a change in the schedule in the last few days. And next week, the forum will be on Sacred Ground in Action. Many of you have participated in the last year in Sacred Ground, our ongoing conversation about race in America. We are, our last Sacred Ground group finished, I think, this past week. So today we are commemorating that in our services, and we are looking at next week in our forum on what our next steps are as a congregation to engage with racial reconciliation as a congregation. So please join us at 9 o'clock next week in the forum. We'll see you in service shortly.